Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. Hope everyone's doing good. It's a slightly chilly morning today. Today is the first day of fall. It's hard to believe. 2023. So here we are. We're in fall mode. I like the fall. The leaves are starting to change color. It's getting a little bit more crisp at night, but it was crisp at night, usually during the summer. So, kind of, in Halloween mode. I did a big show on two Halloween movies, my two latest purchases. So that was really cool. It was funny because I was thinking of maybe waiting to post the video or wait to do the video on Halloween because I had this whole kind of story around finally getting Halloween on Blu-ray. I did a show on it on buying that amazing movie on Blu-ray finally, and then I also bought the last one in the whole franchise installment, supposedly Halloween Ends, which I actually really like. And I did a show on both movies, and I watched them both back to back. And I thought, especially around Halloween from '79, maybe I'm gonna wait to post it and do it for on Halloween. But I was like, well, no, I'm just gonna do it now because for me, every day's Halloween, so it doesn't really think I don't really think in terms of like a seasonal thing. Obviously, when the season approaches, I get pretty excited by it. But I was like, well, screw it. I'll do something special when when we get closer to the actual season. So I just went ahead and posted it. But yeah, and before we get started for today's video, tonight at around 8 o'clock, if anyone is in the Thomaston area, Rockland or Thomaston area here in Maine, we're going to be doing a show with Quantum at the Hilltop Tavern right in Thomaston. It's a cool place. It's a brand new venue. The venue or the building itself has been under many different names. It was at one point this place for quite a few years called Billy's Tavern. And Billy's Tavern at one point, going back quite a few years, was a pretty big hotspot for music and entertainment. I remember coming across that place back quite a few years ago and going to see music there a lot. And then also I got a chance to play there a few times. And it was great because there was always tons of people that would show up, and it just had this whole like great atmosphere. And it was really good food, and the whole thing was just really cool. And then it changed hands and someone else bought it, and it never really kept up the momentum, and people seemed to stop going there, and they didn't have a food kitchen. So I don't know, it lasted. When it closed and then it was reopened by another business, it was only there for like I think one season, and then they closed it, and then it sat dormant for a few years, and then just recently it was opened this past summer. I think it was like July 4th, and they've just started to, the last month or so, they started having music there, and I went there actually it was on July 4th just to check it out, and they had a DJ playing there, and it was a cool spot. It had a cool vibe to it. I was impressed, and it was kind of like how Billy's used to be. They had a full menu, which was a whole different trip, which was great. And people were there. There was a lot of people there. It was July 4th weekend, so they had the big fireworks thing going on down in that area. So, which is not. I mean, obviously that only comes once a year, but that was one of the reasons why there were so many people down there. Usually, I don't think it's quite that busy, but it was cool. So I booked a couple of fast forward a few weeks from that point, I booked a couple of gigs there with Quantum. So tonight will be our first gig there. So if you're in the area, please come by. It should be fun, and we'll see how things go. We it's a new venue, a new space, and so we'll see where it could lead to. So check it out if you're around, and it's a free show. It's a cool spot. There's plenty of places to sit. They have a big bar, big full menu, and parking is not an issue. It's in a nice area, so it's very cool. So we'll see what happens. I'm excited, and it's I think we're playing about a 3 hour set, so it's kind of a long set or a long show, but I don't know. I like doing the longer sets overall because I don't know. I always feel for me, I mean, doing shorter sets is fine too, but where you have like in 45 minutes or an hour, or and then you have some sets that are 2 hours. The long sets I actually like a little bit more, even though obviously it's more work. But I always find that, like, I know for me, it always feels like it takes me a long time to kind of warm up, or like, it's a cliche thing to say, but to like, maybe get in the zone that night. And it takes me a long time. It's very hard for me to start and just be in that space. I'm always like inspired by and slightly envious or slightly jealous of musicians that I know and musicians that I look up to that seem to have that thing go off the minute they start playing, of where they're just in that zone, and it's very inspiring. Whereas for me, it takes me a while to kind of like get my bearings, even if it's and it doesn't really matter. I mean, it does, obviously it does matter, but if there's a project or a show that we're playing at, it could be, and it goes for also when I'm playing drums and bands. It's the same thing for that as it is with Quantum. But for instance, like gigs that I have where I play drums, I play drums for that particular band or whatever. If it's a group that we don't really rehearse and it's more, kind of seat of our pants, it's the same kind of thing usually. Maybe a little bit more because of the circumstances. But it also happens for me too with a band that maybe we are like really rehearsed and we do play a lot. And so we really know what's kind of going to go on for the most part. Set list, the whole thing. Even in that format, it takes me a while. And with Quantum too, where that stuff is very rehearsed, but it's the same thing. And it takes me a while to just warm up. And especially with the Quantum stuff, we tend to try to gauge what the vibe is in the room. If there's like people sitting around us and eating dinner, if there's like families and kids, and if it's more of a low key kind of energy as opposed to like the bar crowd or people wanting to party and dance, and that kind of thing, where it's a little bit more ruckus. And it's, I don't know, I think for me it's a fun challenge, and sometimes you don't, I find too, you just have off nights and you don't really get in that space. Sometimes you do, and it's wonderful, a wonderful feeling. But it's, I always feel the more prepared you are, the more you can adjust and hopefully get in that space. But it is what it is, and it's that to me it's a science to it, and it's also another kind of sidebar to the whole thing, of trying to improve your abilities. So it's always great that way, and you never really, go in. At least for me, you never go in with like full confidence, and you're, the minute you press the on button, you're ready to go. It's always a slow burn, if you will. So today's show, I'm very excited about. This movie today is a movie that I just discovered for the first time. I found this movie at Bull Moose up in Bangor. It was super cheap, and totally love this movie. At first, when I was watching it, I never seen it before. At first, when I started watching it, I watched it last night. I wasn't sure what to think. I was kind of like a little bit on the fence in the beginning. But by the end of it and getting towards like the third act, I was like, yes, I'm into this movie. I love it. It took me a little while to kind of get to that place, but once I got hooked and I was like in 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 that space of really digging what I was seeing, I was like, yep, I'm in it to win it. This movie is pretty awesome. And that is just this movie is just it's hilarious. And it's just it came out in 1979. It's called The Bog. I got this on Saturday, like I said, and this is a really awesome Blu-ray. It doesn't have a whole lot of special features, but the special features that are on here are kind of interesting. It's a double feature. There's two movies on this Blu-ray. The packaging is really cool. It's actually got the original artwork for for the drive-in. 79. What a year. This movie, it's pretty slow. It's super slow. It's called The Bog, and it came out in 1979. It's super slow in the beginning, but like I said, once it got going, I found myself, okay, this is great, and I totally dig this. I had never seen it before. It was super cheap. I saw it on the shelf, and I was like, what the hell? I'll snag it up. It was it's two movies for the price of one. Super cheap. So super excited that I got it. And I started watching. Today's review is on The Bog, and the other movie, Mako: The Jaws of Death. I started watching it last night, and so far that movie is just awesome. Really, really great. And I'm going to do a review on that also as two separate videos. But super cool. And I have to say, The Bog, it is definitely, I have to say, it's probably one of the most low budget movies I've ever seen in my life. Like, I mean, obviously a huge fan of like the real gritty, underground, guerrilla style filmmaking. You know, done tons of shows in the past on, one of my favorite directors, Herschel Gordon Lewis. And he kind of took it to an extreme of where, a lot of the times for a lot of these exploitation movies, you have some actors that are really, more well known later in their career, or vice versa, where they were, pretty big stars, but then their careers kind of take a turn for the worse. But what I've seen in a lot of these exploitation movies, sometimes you have actors that kind of get their start in these like super uber low budget exploitation movies, and they go on to become big stars. One actor, I can't remember the name of the movie, but I believe Brad Pitt was actually in a couple of really super uber low budget movies. There's other examples of that too. And then you also have the reverse, where you have actors at one point that were, big stars, but then their careers are not, technically going so well. So then they get into going into they go into the exploitation world. Uh, you know, Example of that would be Chuck Connors. A really big star in Hollywood at one point in like the 70s, 60s. Star of the TV show Rawhide. He did a bunch of westerns, but then his career went awry a little bit, and he wasn't really an A-list actor anymore. And then he started getting into the world of exploitation and Tourist Trap. He ended up getting that role, which is my favorite horror exploitation movie of all time. And I love a lot of his films. I actually bought one of his films that I haven't seen, that I'm going to do a show on and watch eventually. I love his work in the low budget world. I love all of his stuff. He's one of my favorites. But so there's always those kinds of two things that happen a lot in the exploitation world. And then a lot of the times there's actors that maybe have training in the theater, and then you have actors who have like zero experience. And then, like I said, with Herschel Gordon Lewis, who took it to an extreme of where he'll like literally, minutes before the cameras are rolling, and he's got, he's shooting a scene or scenes in a particular location. Somebody walks by, happens to be just like walking down a street with their, walking their dog or something totally random, and he'll grab that person and be like, "Hey, you want to be in the movies?" And he'll like put them in the movie and in the scene. Just totally crazy. He did that. One of the most notorious or famous things that he did was for Blood Feast. Herschel Gordon Lewis, one of the greatest movies of his career, probably my favorite. And there's a whole scene where the climax of the movie where these garbage men are used, and the killer, where the police and everything are after the killer at the end of the film, and he eventually gets like thrown into this garbage truck, and he gets mangled, and that's how he dies. But there's this whole scene where there's like these two guys in these two garbage men of the garbage truck, and there's the whole story of where Herschel Gordon Lewis literally pulled them from the street. He saw them with this garbage truck, and he's like, "Hey, you guys want to be in the movie?" And he actually put them in the movie, and it's completely hilarious and awesome. And he did that a lot, So you have, a lot of those kinds of things that happen in the exploitation world. Probably the majority, of the actors and actresses in a lot of these exploitation movies didn't have all that much experience. And a lot of them, the other thing too, a lot of those actors and actresses, and then also a lot of the producers and a lot of the directors, came out of the porn industry. So you have this, weird, kind of combination and kind of eclectic backgrounds from all the people involved. And I have to say, The Bog, like, I don't know, after watching this, I didn't know of any of the actors. I didn't recognize any of the actors or actresses in it. But I have to say that these people were like, this might have been their first movie, or maybe they were like literally pulled off the street. And it's freaking hilarious. Like, it's unbelievable. And the movie is basically, it's pretty straightforward, but it's basically centered on this bog where there's some kind of like mystical creature. And the other thing too is I consider this movie to be definitely a monster movie. It's definitely a creature feature. But the premise of the movie is that there's this bog, and there's a series of all of these disappearances of these people that are, going out fishing or just going out on the bog to cruise around. These people start disappearing, and their bodies they start finding bodies. The various search parties, and their bodies are drained of blood. And the whole movie is about basically this like kind of, he's like half fish, half crab, half man monster that lives underneath this bog and is eating everyone. And there's a character who's this witch in this movie who actually is like controlling him to a degree. She has these clairvoyant powers, and she kind of controls this monster. And it's pretty hilarious, and it's kind of an awesome movie. The ending is just amazing. The other thing that this movie reminded me of, which had to have been inspired by, was the creature from the Black Lagoon. Very much kind of in that vein, but obviously, even by the standards of when that movie was made, this movie had significantly, I would say significantly, the budget was way lower, and the caliber of actors was not as high. But again, it's one of those things of like, this movie is, on paper, is so bad, and and again, I love low budget movies. I love seeing what directors and actors can do with so little money, and what they can bring to the screen as I've gotten older and the more films I've seen, I am not a big fan of CGI. I really, there are examples of CGI where it's pretty flawless and amazing, and you obviously see that kind of thing in big budget films, which I love. But like overall, when it comes to I think it's pretty rare. I don't think it's something that's very successful a lot of the times. I think two amazing examples of CGI blue screen would be the first three Lord of the Rings movies. I think that the use of the CGI is just incredible. And but also that being said, and then another movie I would say took it to a whole nother level is the first Matrix movie. But that being said, both of those movies also relied heavily on practical effects. There was a lot of CGI, obviously, in blue screen, and a lot of the use of this newer technology. Because at that point, those movies are older now, especially The Matrix. But at that point, technology had kind of arrived. At a certain point of where it was kind of limitless, or it is limitless. But those films used practical effects and CGI in such a great way where there's a balance. And so a lot of the stuff you actually do see is actually real and stuff, that's kind of tangible, and you can't really tell what the line is blurred of as far as what's real and what's not real, and it's seamless. I think now with movies of that caliber or that budget, the you can see right away. You can tell right away when something is like purely artificial and it's there. It just doesn't have that seamless quality to it. So I love films where they're the reliance of creating these effects or monster effects or whatnot. Everything is in camera. And it's all based on practical effects, and I just love that. Even if it's a guy kind of running around in a suit, like this movie, The Bog, you know, it doesn't have many effects in it, but what they use, and even in this case, The Bog, of where, I mean, it's like, I don't know, I have no idea what the budget is for this movie, but it's like when you look at it, you're like, wow, like this was made for like $75 or something. I mean, it looks kind of like a homemade student film of like a bunch of kids hanging out with a couple of cameras and just running around in the woods with their friends, you know, kind of a thing where there's virtually no budget. The only expense they had was to like go get pizza or something. I mean, that's kind of what this movie's like. But again, I think it's so bad in regards to you know what filmmaking is. It works and it's super fun and totally ridiculous, and it's great. Again, I love the ending for this film. The ending was really great. By the third act or so, I was really, you know, enjoying this film, and it was freaking hilarious. Music is great. And a lot of the times when I watch movies that are this low budget, you know, in the exploitation world, there's sometimes where I'm thinking to myself, wow, how did this even get made? How did this even get put out there? How is this movie on Blu-ray? How is it on 4K? How is it, you know, being reissued? How is it finding this audience? You know, whether the movie was even distributed at that time or had no distribution and went, you know, was basically shelved, maybe played in a few theaters and then went maybe to directly to VHS, if that, or certain films that were just got a really good distribution, and then for a while they were very popular, but then they fell into total obscurity. And I'm just like, wow, like I'm amazed by how, you know, these things get made. But at the same time, I'm totally enjoying it, and it's hilarious. It's totally hilarious. And again, at the end of the day, I think people love movies for pretty simple reasons. I think it's, at least for me, it's a pretty simple way of how I think about it. Is I want to, whatever the movie is, I want to hopefully escape and forget about what happened that day or that night, and just escape for those 2 hours, and forget about the mundane stuff or whatever, and just have that healthy, uh, hopefully fun-filled, escapist um, experience. And to me, in a nutshell, that's all it is. I don't look at it, like I said, I don't look at it as, you know, uh, an intellectual thing. I think it's just like an emotional thing. And it's not something you have to like necessarily analyze, or you're going to naturally react to something, whatever it is, whether it's like quote unquote, serious art house film or a big budget film. You're going to have a reaction to it. And generally, there's exceptions, but generally, how you just physically or emotionally react to it is, whether it's good or bad, that's probably going to stay with you. And there's something, when that happens, for good or bad, something's resonating with you, and you're reacting to it, and it's not really, and it happens anyway. It happens regardless, and it's not something you have to like necessarily sit around to think about. But this movie's awesome. I'm super excited. I bought this, 1979. I mean, what a hot mess. What a piece of trash. But again, classic example of, it's so bad it's good. I mean, literally, it's great. It's great. Um, and this was directed by Don Kessler, who I definitely have heard the name. He did some of the Grizzly Adams movies, which is pretty hilarious. Um, the Capture of Grizzly Adams. Um, those were a, a Day in Old Milwaukee was another film he did. Uh, I remember the Grizzly Adams movies being pretty popular, and I believe there was a TV show that eventually was made. Or actually, yeah, The Capture of Grizzly Adams was a TV show. Um, A Day in Milwaukee was from 1964. Wow, that's crazy, but hilarious, and super trashy experience, but wonderful at the same time. So, and again, I'm excited about finishing the second movie, Mako: The Jaws of Death, which is just completely ridiculous and amazing. So stay tuned for the review of that movie. So definitely check this out, The Bog, 1979. It's definitely a creature feature, but I mean, feels like it was shot for $50, but still fun as hell. So thanks again, and we will see you next time.